All right, kids. So since I finished Number of the Stars, I thought I would end the school year reading this book, How to Eat Fried Worms. I realized that two of the books that I read since, well, actually all three have been kind of serious. And I thought it would be fun to end the school year with a funny book. This also is a movie, so you might be able to watch it after we're done. So How to Eat Fried Worms. And I'm just going to read probably, instead of chapters, just read for a length of time. Chapter 1, The Bet. Hey, Tom, where were you last night? Yeah, you missed it. Alan and Billy came up the front walk. Tom was sitting on his porch step, bouncing a tennis ball. Old man Tater caught Joe as we were climbing through the fence, so we all had to go back, and he made us pile the peaches on his kitchen table, and then he called our mothers. Joe's mother hasn't let him out yet. Where were you? Tom stopped bouncing the tennis ball. He was tall. He was a tall, skinny boy who took his troubles very seriously. My mother kept me in. What for? I wouldn't eat my dinner. Alan sat down at the step below Tom and began to chew his thumbnail. What was it? Salmon casserole. Billy flopped down on the grass, chunky, snub-nosed, freckled. Salmon casserole's not so bad. Wouldn't she let you just eat 2 bites? Asked Alan. Sometimes my mother says, well, all right, if I'll just eat 2 bites. I wouldn't even eat 1. That's stupid, said Billy. 1 bite can't hurt you. I'd eat 1 bite of anything before I'd let them send me up to my room right after supper. Tom shrugged. How about mud? Alan asked Billy. You wouldn't eat a bite of mud. Alan argued a lot, small, knobby-kneed, nervous, gnawing at his thumbnail, his face smudged, his red hair mussed, shirt tail hanging out, shoelaces untied. We're getting a picture of what Alan looks like, aren't we? Sure I would, Billy said. Mud? What's mud? Just dirt, a little water in it. My father says everyone eats a pound of dirt every year anyway. How about poison? That's different. Billy rolled over on his back. Is your mother going to make you eat the leftovers today at lunch? She asked Tom. She never has before. How about worms? Alan asked Billy. Tom's sister's cat squirmed out from under the porch and rubbed against Billy's knee. Sure, said Billy. Why not? Worms are just dirt. Yeah, but they bleed. So you'd have to cook them. Cows bleed. I bet $100 you wouldn't really eat a worm. You talk big now, but you wouldn't if you were sitting at the dinner table with a worm on your plate. I bet I would. I'd eat 15 worms if somebody bet me $100. You really want to bet? I'll bet you $50 you can't eat 15 worms. I really will. Where are you going to get $50? That's a tough question, isn't it? In my savings account, I've got $130.79 in my savings account. I know because last week I put in the $5 my grandmother gave me for my birthday. Your mother wouldn't let you take it out. She would if I lost the bet. She'd have to. I'd tell her I was going to sell my stamp collection otherwise. And I thought that with all my own money that I earned mowing lawns, so I can do whatever I want with it. I'll bet you $50 you can't eat 15 worms. Come on, you're chicken. You know you can't do it. I wouldn't do it, said Tom. If salmon casserole makes me sick, think about 15 worms would do. Joe came scuffing up the walk and flopped down beside Billy. He was a small boy with dark hair and a long nose and big brown eyes. What's going on? Come on, said Alan to Billy. Tom can be your second and Joe'll be mine. Just like in a duel. You think it's so easy? Here's your chance to make $50. Billy dangled a leaf in front of the cat, but the cat just rubbed against his knee, purring. What kind of worms? Regular worms. Not those big green ones that get on the tomatoes. I won't eat those. And I won't eat them all at once. It might make me sick. One worm a day for 15 days. And he can eat them any way he wants, said Tom. Boiled, stewed, fried, fricasseed? Yeah, but we provide the worms, said Joe. And they have to be witness present when he eats them. Either me or Alan or somebody you can trust. Not just you and Billy. Okay, Alan said to Billy. Billy scratched the cat's ears. $50. That was a lot of money. How bad could a worm taste? He'd eaten fried liver, salmon loaf, mushrooms, tongue, pig's feet. Other kids' parents were always nagging them to eat. He had begun to worry about how much he ate. Not that he was fat. He just hadn't worked off all his winter blubber yet. He slid his hand into his stomach and furtively squeezed the side of his stomach. Worms were just dirt. Dirt wasn't fattening. If he won $50, he could put that mini bike George Cunningham's brother had promised to sell him in September before he went away to college. Heck, he could gag anything down for $50, couldn't he? He looked up. I can use ketchup or mustard or anything like that as much as I want? Alan nodded. Okay. Alan stood up. Okay. Well, we know what the conflict is, don't we? Billy's got to eat 15 worms. I wonder if you guys would do that. Chapter 2, digging. No, said Tom, that's not fair. He and Alan and Joe were wandering around behind the barns at Billy's house, arguing over where to dig the first worm. What do you mean it's not fair, said Joe. Nobody said anything about where the worms were supposed to come from. We can get them anywhere we want. Not from a manure pile, said Tom. That's not fair. Even if we didn't make a rule about something, you still have to be fair. What difference does it make where the worm comes from, said Alan. A worm's a worm. There's nothing wrong with manure, said Joe. It comes from cows, just like milk. Joe was sly, devious, a schemer. The manure pile had been his idea. You and Billy have got to be fair too, said Alan to Tom. Besides, we'll dig in the old part of the pile where it doesn't smell much anymore. Come on, said Tom, starting off across the field, dragging his shovel. If it was fair, you wouldn't be so anxious about it. Would you eat a worm from a manure pile? Joe and Alan ran to catch up. I wouldn't eat a worm, period, said Joe. So you can't go by that. Yeah, but if your mother told you to go and pick some daisies for the supper table, would you pick the daisies off a manure pile? My mother wouldn't ask me. She'd ask my sister. You know what I mean. I love how these boys are bantering back and forth. Alan, Tom, and Joe leaned on their shovels under a tree in the apple orchard, watching the worms they had dug squirming on a flat rock. Not him, said Tom, pointing to a night crawler. Why not? Look at him. He'd choke a dog. Geez, exploded Alan. You expect us to pick one Billy can just gulp down like an ant or a nit? Gulping's not eating, said Joe. The worms got to be big enough so Billy has to cut it into bites and eat it with a fork off a plate. It's this one or nothing, said Alan, picking up the night crawler. Tom considered the matter. It wouldn't be fun watching Billy trying to eat that night crawler, he grinned. Boy, it was huge. A regular python. Wait till Billy saw it. We let you choose where to dig, said Alan. After all, thought Tom, Billy couldn't expect to win $50 by just gulping down a few measly little baby worms. All right, come on, he turned and started back toward the barns, dragging his shovel. Chapter 3, Training Camp. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Billy was doing push-ups in the deserted horse barn. He wasn't worried about eating the first worm, but people were always daring him to do things, and he found it was better to look around to try to figure things out, get himself ready. Last winter, Alan had dared him to sleep out all night in the igloo they built in Tom's backyard. Why not? Billy had thought to himself. What could happen? About midnight, huddled, shivering, under his blankets in the darkness, he'd begun to wonder if he should give up and go home. His feet felt like aching stones in his boots. Even his tongue inside his mouth was cold. But half an hour later, as he was stubbornly dancing about outside in the moonlight to warm himself up, Tom's dog Martha had come along with 6 other dogs, all in a pack, and Billy had coaxed them into the igloo and blocked the door with an orange crate. And after the dogs had stopped wrestling and nipping and barking and sniffing around, they'd all gone to sleep in a heap with Billy in the middle, as warm as an onion in stew. Well, we're learning that Billy is clever, aren't we? But he hadn't been able to think of anything special to do to prepare himself for eating a worm. So he was just limbering up in general. Push-ups, knee bends, jumping jacks, red-faced, perspiring. Nearby, on an orange crate, he'd set out bottles of ketchup and Worcestershire sauce, jars of piccalilli and mustard, a box of crackers, salt and pepper shakers, a lemon, a slice of cheese, his mother's tin cinnamon and sugar shaker, a box of Kleenex, a jar of maraschino cherries, some horseradish, and a plastic honey bear. Tom's head appeared around the door. Ready? Bill scrambled up, brushing back his hair. Yeah. Ta-ra! Tom flung the door open. Alan marched in, carrying a covered silver platter in both hands. Joe slouching along beside him with a napkin over one arm, nodding and smiling obsequiously. Tom dragged another orange crate over beside the first. Alan set the silver platter on it. A chair, cried Alan. A chair for the monsieur. That's bad French for monsieur. Come on, said Billy. Cut the clowning. Tom found an old milking stool in one of the horse stalls, just dusted it off with his napkin, showing his teeth, and then ushered Billy into it. Ladies and gentlemen, shouted Alan, I present my masterpiece, Verm a la mud. He swept the cover off the platter. Arg, cried Billy, recoiling. Chapter 4, The First Worm. I might have to stop in the middle of this, but I'll probably keep reading. Okay, Chapter 4, The First Worm. The huge night crawler sprawled limply in the center of the platter, brown and steaming. Boiled, said Tom. We boiled it. Billy stormed around the barn, kicking barrels and posts, arguing, a night crawler isn't a worm. If it was a worm, I'd be called a worm. A night crawler is a night crawler. Finally, Joe ran off to get his father's dictionary. Night crawler, noun, earthworm, especially a large earthworm found on the soil surface at night. So it's a worm. Billy kicked the barrel. It still wasn't fair. He didn't care what any dictionary said. Everybody knew the difference between a night crawler and a worm. Look at that thing. Yerg, it was big as a souvenir pencil from the Empire State Building. Ugh, he poked it with his finger. Alan said they'd agreed right at the start that he and Joe could choose the worms. If Billy was going to cheat, the bet was off. He got up and started for the door. He guessed he had other things to do besides argue all day with a fink. So Tom took Billy aside into a horse stall and put his arm around Billy's shoulders and talked to him about George Cunningham's brother's mini bike and how they could ride it on the trail under the power lines behind Odell's farm, up and down the hills, bounding over rocks. Room, room. Sure, it was a big worm, but only be a couple more bites. Did he want to lose a mini bike over 2 bites? Slop enough mustard and ketchup and horseradish on it? He wouldn't even taste it. Yeah, said Billy. I could probably eat this one, but I got to eat 15. You can't quit now, said Tom. Look at them. He nodded at Alan and Joe, waited beside the orange crates. They'll tell everybody you were chicken. It'll be all over school. Come on. He led Billy back to the orange crates, sat him down, tied the napkin around his neck. Alan flourished the knife and fork. Wouldn't measure like it carved lengthwise or crosswise. And I'll stop there, but I'll keep reading in a minute.